Okay, let's unpack this. If you've ever felt just, well, swamped by all the information out there, but you still really crave that deep, meaningful insight, especially from foundational texts, then I think you're in the right place today.
Definitely. We're setting out to really explore one of the most powerful and honestly emotional chapters in the Bible. We're talking about the Gospel of John, chapter 11.
It's a teaching deep dive today, and we're drawing on some really thorough study materials put together by the You Need Faith in Jesus team. Our goal to
Right.
really get under the hood of this chapter.
That's right. We're using the King James Version specifically, looking closely at the language to understand Jesus's absolute authority, particularly over death, which is just dramatically demonstrated with the raising of Lazarus.
And it's not just about the miracle itself, is it? It's the theology, the timing, the raw human emotion.
Hmm.
It's all woven together. The You Need Faith in Jesus team really emphasizes how crucial this chapter is.
It really is. What's so fascinating and what we really want to dig into is how this one event, this direct confrontation with death, it forces everyone, the people back then, and us reading it now, to grapple with who Jesus is.
Yeah, it's not just about a future promise.
Exactly. He doesn't just say, you'll get life later. He basically says, I am life, right here, right now. So our mission, if you will, is to analyze every bit of this pivotal moment.
Okay, so let's set the scene. John chapter 11, verse 1 takes us to Bethany. And it's important to note, this isn't some remote village. It's near Jerusalem.
Right, only about 2 miles away. So whatever happens here is happening practically on the doorstep of the religious authorities. It's very public, very visible.
And the focus is on this family,
Yeah.
Lazarus and his two sisters, Mary and Martha. People Jesus clearly loves deeply.
Yeah, the text makes that clear. And notice verse 2, it specifically identifies Mary as the one who later anoints Jesus' feet with oil, which John details in the next chapter, chapter 12, verse 3.
So John's flagging their importance right away. He's establishing the intimacy they shared with Jesus before the crisis even hits.
Exactly. And the crisis hits simply. Lazarus is sick. But look at how the sisters react. Their message to Jesus isn't a demand, it's something else entirely.
It's incredibly restrained, isn't it? Full of trust. John chapter 11, verse 3 gives us their message.
It says, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. That's it.
Just, the one you love is sick.
Think about that. It's not come quick or you have to heal him. It's an appeal based purely on their relationship, on his love for Lazarus. They're basically saying, we trust your love is enough reason for you to know and to act.
That level of trust, just resting in his love, must have resonated deeply with Jesus, even knowing the pain they were in. But his response immediately shifts the narrative, doesn't it?
Here.
He takes their personal crisis and gives it this huge divine purpose.
Right away. His reply, recorded in John chapter 11, verse 4, sets the whole divine timetable. He tells the messengers, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby.
Wow. Not unto death. Even though Lazarus does die, what does that mean? It means the ultimate outcome isn't death?
Precisely. The ultimate outcome is God's glory and the Son being glorified. It means this terrible situation, this sickness, this grief, it's been allowed specifically to become a stage, a backdrop for something spectacular God is about to do.
So the tragedy itself becomes the necessary ingredient for the miracle.
Exactly. The analysis we're drawing from points this out clearly. God sometimes allows situations that look utterly hopeless, like they're leading straight to destruction, not to destroy, but to create the perfect conditions for an undeniable display of his power, something that simple healing wouldn't achieve.
Like we saw with the man born blind back in John chapter 9, Jesus said that was so the works of God could be displayed in him.
It's the same principle. Maximum difficulty equals maximum glory when God intervenes. But then comes the part that must have been so hard for Mary and Martha, and frankly, it can be hard for us too.
The delay.
Yes. Verse 5 explicitly says Jesus loved Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. But verse 6 tells us, when he had heard therefore that he was sick, he abode 2 days still in the same place where he was.
He hears the news about someone he loves being gravely ill, and he waits 2 whole days. That feels counterintuitive.
It does from a human perspective, but we have to understand God's delays aren't denials. They aren't signs of indifference. Jesus was operating on God's perfect schedule, not ours, and that 2-day wait was absolutely crucial.
Why specifically 2 more days, adding to the time it took the messenger to get there and back?
It pushes the timeline out. By the time Jesus arrives, as we'll see in verse 17, Lazarus will have been in the tomb for 4 days. And that 4-day mark is critical in Jewish understanding at the time.
Okay, explain that significance.
While there was a common belief that the spirit or soul might linger near the body for up to 3 days after death. So if Jesus had arrived on day 2 or 3 and raised Lazarus, skeptics could have argued, well, maybe he wasn't really dead, or his spirit hadn't fully departed.
So waiting until the fourth day removed all doubt.
Completely. By the 4th day, decomposition would have begun. Death was considered absolute, final, irreversible. There was no explaining away what Jesus was about to do. It had to be a miracle of creation, not just resuscitation.
So the delay, painful as it was for the sisters, was strategically necessary to set the stage for the greatest possible miracle, leaving no room for doubt.
That's exactly the point. Purpose in the delay. Hashtag 1.2, fear, metaphor, and the greater miracle. BV 7:16.
Okay, so after those 2 deliberate days of waiting, Jesus finally says to the disciples, "Let us go into Judea again." That's verse 7.
And the disciples' reaction is immediate. It's fear. Understandable fear, really.
Yeah, they basically say, "Master, the Jews were just trying to stone you there, and you want to go back." They're referencing what happened back in John chapter 10, verse 31. The danger was real. It was recent.
They're thinking about survival, about the very real threat of violence from the religious leaders in Jerusalem. Their focus is on the immediate physical danger.
Their faith, much like Martha's will be later, seems limited by what they can see and what they just experienced.
It is, and Jesus addresses their fear, but not by dismissing the danger. He uses this really interesting metaphor about walking in the day versus the night, verses 9 and 10.
He says, "Are there not 12 hours in the day? If any man walk in the day, he stumbleth not, because he seeth the light of this world. But if a man walk in the night, he stumbleth, because there is no light in him." How should we understand that?
He's using day to represent walking in God's will, within his timing, under his divine protection and purpose. Essentially, he's saying, as long as I am doing what the Father sent me to do, when he wants me to do it, I am perfectly safe. I'm walking in his light.
So external threats don't matter if you're operating within God's appointed time and task.
That's the idea. He's secure in the Father's will. The night would be stepping outside of that will, acting on his own timing or agenda, where he would be vulnerable. His enemies can't touch him until his hour has come, the time appointed by the Father.
That's a powerful reassurance for them, and frankly for us too, if we're walking in his will.
There's a divine safety, even amidst danger. Then he pivots back to Lazarus, but he uses another metaphor, which causes some confusion.
Right. John chapter 11, verse 11, he tells them, "Our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go that I may awake him out of sleep."
Now, sleep was sometimes used as a euphemism for death, especially for believers in the Old Testament and later by Paul. But the disciples, they latch onto the literal meaning.
Why? Probably because it meant less danger, right, if he's just sleeping.
Exactly. They reply in verse 12, "Lord, if he sleep, he shall do well." In other words, great, he's recovering. No need for us to risk our necks going back to Judea then. They're relieved, but they've missed the point entirely.
Which forces Jesus to be blunt. No more metaphors. He has to state the plain, hard truth for them to grasp the magnitude of the journey.
Yes, John chapter 11, verse 14, "Then said Jesus unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead." Just stark reality.
And then he explains why he allowed this to happen, why he waited. His focus wasn't just on Lazarus, it was on them, the disciples.
It's incredibly revealing. John chapter 11, verse 15, "And I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, to the intent ye may believe. Nevertheless, let us go unto him."
I am glad that I was not there. That sounds harsh, but he explains it's to the intent you may believe. He's saying the purpose of letting Lazarus die, the reason for the delay, was ultimately for their faith.
He wanted them to witness something far greater than a healing. He wanted them to see his power over death itself. Why? Because their faith needed to be rock solid before they faced the trauma of his own suffering and death on the cross.
They needed this absolute proof of his divinity, his life-giving power, before seeing his apparent defeat.
Precisely. This miracle was a crucial piece of their training, their preparation. And then in the midst of this heavy discussion about death and danger, we get this surprising line from Thomas.
Yeah, Thomas, who often gets a bad rap as doubting Thomases. But here in verse 16, he shows incredible, if perhaps pessimistic, loyalty.
When the decision is made, he says to the other disciples, "Let us also go that we may die with him."
Wow. He fully expects this trip to end badly. He thinks they're walking into a death trap.
He does. He sees the danger clearly. But his commitment to Jesus overrides his fear. It's this gritty, resigned courage. If the master is going to die, we'll die alongside him. It's actually a very moving declaration of loyalty, even if it's tinged with despair.
It really shows the human element, the fear and the loyalty all mixed together as they head towards Bethany.
So they make the journey. And when Jesus arrives near Bethany, verse 17 confirms the reality he orchestrated. He found that he had lain in the grave 4 days already.
There it is, the 4-day mark. We talked about its significance, removing any ambiguity about death. By now, hope would have been extinguished for the family and the mourners.
Absolutely. The initial shock and grief would have settled into a grim finality. Decomposition, the smell. It was undeniably over in the human sense. The Jewish tradition about the spirit departing after 3 days meant this was definitively past the point of no return.
And Martha, who seems to be the more pragmatic, action-oriented sister, hears Jesus is coming and goes out to meet him first. Mary stays in the house initially.
Right. And Martha's first words to Jesus in verse 21 are just packed with emotion, a real mix of faith and regret.
She says, "Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died."
You can almost hear the heartache, the what if. She believes firmly in his power to heal if he had been present. Her faith seems bound by his physical proximity. By time, she's looking backward.
If only. That's such a human response in grief, isn't it? Questioning the timing, the circumstances.
It really is. She believed in his power then, but she's struggling to see how his power applies now to this irreversible situation. But then, remarkably, she doesn't stop there. She immediately follows up with another statement.
Yeah, in the very next breath, verse 22, she adds, "But I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee."
See, that even now, it's like a flicker of desperate hope breaking through the regret. She still believes he's some kind of special connection, some influence with God.
But it's still slightly off, isn't it? She sees him as someone who needs to ask God, like a prophet maybe. She doesn't fully grasp that he is God, that the power resides in him.
Exactly. Her faith is real, it's reaching, but it hasn't landed on his full identity yet. She believes he can request a miracle. She doesn't quite see he can command one by his own authority. But that, even now, is the opening Jesus needs. Hashtag tag 2.2, the I am statement and the shift. Verse 23 to 27.
So Jesus responds directly to that flicker of hope. He gives her a simple, direct promise in verse 23.
He says, thy brother shall rise again.
Okay. Now, Martha hears that, and she interprets it through her existing theological framework. She understands resurrection, but as a future event.
Right. Her reply in verse 24 shows this clearly. I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. She's affirming a correct doctrine, something widely believed based on Old Testament prophecies like Daniel chapter 12, verse 2.
So she's saying, yes, I believe in the general resurrection at the end of time. It's a comfort, but it's distant. It doesn't solve the immediate pain and loss.
Exactly. Her hope is orthodox, but it's compartmentalized. It's for the last day, not for this day, this tragedy. And this is where Jesus makes the most profound shift.
This is the core of the chapter, maybe one of the core statements in the whole Bible. He takes her future hope and slams it right into the present moment.
He doesn't just promise resurrection. He claims to be the source of it himself right now. This is the monumental I am statement of John chapter 11, verses 25 and 26. Let's read it fully.
Okay. Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this?
Just pause on that. I am the resurrection, not I will perform or I will bring, but I am it. The power, the source, the very substance of eternal life resides in him personally.
And then the two parts, though he were dead, yet shall he live. That seems to point to physical resurrection, like Lazarus. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. That sounds like conquering spiritual death right now.
That's a great way to see it. Believing in him brings immediate spiritual life that transcends physical death. Physical death becomes essentially just a transition for the believer, not the end. It echoes what he said earlier in John chapter 5, verse 24, about passing from death to life the moment you believe.
The claim is just staggering in its scope. He's redefining life and death around himself, and then he puts it directly to her. Believest thou this?
That question is the pivot point. He's asking her, and he asks us, to shift belief from a doctrine about the future to trust in a person who embodies that future now. Do you believe I am this power?
And Martha's response is incredible. It's a huge leap of faith for her. She makes this amazing confession in verse 27.
She says, Yea, Lord, I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into the world.
Wow. She doesn't just say, I believe my brother will rise. She says, I believe who you are. She connects his claim to be the resurrection and the life with his identity as the Messiah, the Son of God.
It's a monumental confession, right up there with Peter's confession in Matthew chapter 16. Her understanding has clicked into place. It's not about the event anymore, it's about the person. Jesus is the hope she was waiting for.
So after this incredible personal revelation and confession, Martha goes back to the house. The text says she called Mary her sister secretly, saying, "The Master is come, and calleth for thee."
Interesting that she does it secretly, maybe to avoid a commotion or just give Mary a private moment. And Mary, as soon as she hears Jesus is asking for her, she gets up quickly and goes to him.
The scene shifts here, doesn't it? From that intense theological dialogue with Martha to just raw, overwhelming grief with Mary.
Completely. Mary comes to where Jesus is, sees him, and verse 32 says she fell down at his feet. It's an act of desperation, of grief, maybe worship too. And then she says the exact same words Martha did.
"Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died."
That repetition is so powerful. It underlines the shared wound, the central question that dominated their grief. Why the delay? Why weren't you here? It wasn't just Martha's thought. It was the cry of both their hearts.
And Jesus' reaction this time is different. When he sees Mary weeping, and also the Jews who came with her weeping, something profound happens within him. Verse 33 describes it.
It says he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. Now that word groan, the King James translation is strong, but the original Greek might be even stronger.
What does the analysis suggest there? It's not just sadness.
No, it's more than sadness. The word suggests a deep indignation, almost like a shudder of anger. He's not angry at Mary's or the mourners. He's reacting with this deep, visceral outrage against death itself.
Outrage, like he's angry at death as an enemy.
Precisely. Death is the consequence of sin, the great mirror of his Father's perfect creation. He's feeling the horror and the wrongness of it, the devastation it causes. It's like this gut-wrenching reaction to the presence of this enemy that has brought such pain to people he loves.
So it's a divine anger at the destruction caused by the fall.
Yes, that seems to be the sense. It connects perhaps to Romans 8, where Paul talks about creation itself groaning under the weight of sin and decay. Jesus feels that cosmic groan, that injustice, intensely in his spirit, and he was troubled, agitated, stirred up by this encounter with death's impact. Hashtag Chacktag 3.2, Jesus wept and the scope of empathy.
Yeria 35-37. And that deep internal groaning, that indignation, it then flows outward into this incredibly human expression. The shortest verse in the English Bible, but maybe one of the most profound. John chapter 11, verse 35.
Jesus wept.
Just 2 words. But they speak volumes.
They really do. And it's important, I think, to distinguish this weeping from the groaning we just talked about. The groaning was indignation against death. The weeping seems to be compassion for the bereaved.
So he's not weeping because Lazarus is dead, because he knows he's about to raise him.
Exactly. He's not weeping out of hopelessness or despair. He knows the plan. He knows Lazarus will be alive in moments. He weeps out of pure empathy. He sees Mary's tears, the mourners' tears. He feels the depth of their current sorrow, and he enters into it with them.
He shares their grief in that moment, even though he holds the solution.
Yes. It's this beautiful demonstration of his humanity, his ability to connect with their suffering. It validates their pain. It shows that God isn't distant or unfeeling. It connects perfectly to Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15, which says, "We have a high priest who can be touched with the feeling of our infirmities."
He doesn't just fix the problem. He feels the pain alongside us. That's incredibly comforting.
It truly is. And the crowd notices his tears, but even then, their reactions are mixed, showing that polarization again.
Right. Verse 36, some of the Jews say, "Behold how he loved him." They see it as evidence of his deep affection for Lazarus.
But others in verse 37 are more skeptical or perhaps critical. They say, "Could not this man, which opened the eyes of the blind, have caused that even this man should not have died?"
So they're questioning his power, or maybe his willingness to use it preventatively. If he can do miracles like healing blindness, why didn't he stop this death?
It shows that even witnessing his genuine emotion didn't convince everyone. Some saw love, others saw a perceived failure or limitation. It foreshadows the divided reaction to the miracle itself.
So Jesus, still feeling that deep emotion, that groaning within himself, finally arrives at the tomb. John describes it as a cave with a stone laid upon it.
A typical burial practice for that time and place, and Jesus' first instruction is very direct, very physical. Verse 39, "Take ye away the stone."
He commands the bystanders, the community, to participate. They have to do something first. But this immediately brings Martha back into the picture.
Yes, practical Martha.
Yeah.
The same Martha who just made that incredible confession of faith, "Thou art the Christ," now bumps up against the stark, sensory reality of the situation.
Her faith meets the smell test, literally. She objects, appealing to reason and the laws of nature.
She says again in verse 39, "Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days.
You can almost hear the practicality in her voice. Lord, are you sure? It's been 4 days. The smell. It's human reason pushing back against the divine command. It's the impossible barrier.
It really highlights that conflict we all face sometimes between faith and reason, between God's word and what our senses tell us. And Jesus' response is gentle, but it's also a reminder.
He doesn't scold her, but he does hold her to her previous belief, connecting it to seeing God's power. What does he say in verse 40?
He says, Said I not unto thee that if thou wouldest believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God?
He's essentially saying, Martha, remember our conversation. Remember what I told you was the condition for seeing God's glory. Belief.
The sequence is crucial. Believe first, then you will see. Not the other way around. Faith has to act even when reason screams otherwise. They had to roll away that stone, a symbol of impossibility and decay, based purely on his word before the miracle could happen.
So our part is often that step of faith, removing the obstacles of doubt and logic, even when things look hopeless, trusting his word over our experience.
That's the challenge. We have to be willing to roll away the stone. Hashtag have 4.2, the creator's voice in the aftermath, VV 41-44.
So they obey. Verse 41 says, Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. Faith acted. And what does Jesus do next?
He prays. But it's not a prayer of pleading or uncertainty. He lifts his eyes and says, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me, and I knew that thou hearest me always, but because of the people which stand by I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me.
It's a prayer of thanksgiving spoken before the miracle happens, demonstrating his absolute confidence and his intimate relationship with the Father. And he explicitly says he's praying aloud for the benefit of the crowd.
Yes, it's instructional. He wants them to understand his authority comes from the Father, that he is the sent one. He's establishing the source of the power they're about to witness.
And then comes the moment. Verse 43, the command.
And when he thus had spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth.
A loud voice. Not a whisper, not a quiet suggestion. A command filled with authority.
The analysis really emphasizes this. This isn't just a loud shout. This is the voice of the Creator. The same power that spoke light into existence in Genesis 1, let there be light, is now speaking life into death. It's a command that death itself cannot disobey.
And the result is immediate and stunning. Verse 44.
And he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin.
He comes out, alive, 4 days dead, bound up, but walking. It must have been an absolutely staggering sight.
Unimaginable, but notice the detail. He's alive, but still tangled up in the grave clothes. He's been resurrected, but he's not entirely free yet.
And Jesus doesn't magically untangle him. He again involves the community. What's the final instruction in verse 44?
Jesus saith unto them, Loose him and let him go.
Loose him and let him go. He gives the task of removing the remnants of death, the bindings, to the people around Lazarus.
And this is such a beautiful picture with huge practical application for us, isn't it? Jesus does the impossible miracle. He brings us from death to life through salvation. Only he can do that.
Right. The resurrection part is his alone.
But the process of getting free from the old stuff, the old habits, the old ways of thinking, the bondages that still cling to us even after we're spiritually alive, the grave clothes, if you will, that's often a community effort.
So he uses the church, our brothers and sisters in faith, to help us get untangled and walk in the fullness of the new life he gave us.
Exactly. Resurrection is instantaneous by his power. Walking in freedom often involves his body, the church, helping to loose us and let us go forward. It's a partnership.
Okay, so Lazarus walks out of the tomb. You'd think everyone who saw that would immediately fall on their faces and worship Jesus, right?
You would think. It's arguably the most undeniable public miracle he performed, a man known to be dead 4 days, now alive and walking. But the reaction, as John records it, is sharply divided. It forces a decision.
Verse 45 says, Then many of the Jews which came to Mary and had seen the things which Jesus did believed on him. So for many, the evidence was overwhelming. It led to faith.
Yes, the intended effect happened for many. They saw the glory of God and believed Jesus was sent from him. But then verse 46.
But some of them went their ways to the Pharisees and told them what things Jesus had done.
Not in belief, but as informants. This incredible display of life-giving power didn't soften the hearts of everyone, particularly those aligned with the religious establishment. For some, it hardened their opposition.
It really proves that principle, doesn't it? Miracles don't automatically create faith in a resistant heart. They amplify what's already there. They lead either to belief or to deeper rejection.
Absolutely. And for the religious leaders, this was the last straw. The news reaches the Sanhedrin, the ruling council, and they convene an emergency meeting. Verses 47 and 48 show their mindset.
They say, "What do we, for this man doeth many miracles? If we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him, and the Romans shall come and take away both our place and nation."
Notice their primary concern. It's not, is this man truly from God? It's, what does this mean for our power, our position, our nation under Roman rule?
It's pure political calculation and self-preservation. They're afraid. His popularity will cause unrest, Roman intervention, and they'll lose their authority, their place, and maybe even national identity.
They completely bypass the truth question in favor of the political consequences. Their priority is maintaining the status quo, even if it means suppressing the Messiah.
And in this heated, fearful council meeting, the high priest that year, Caiaphas, steps forward with what he thinks is a pragmatic solution.
Right. He basically tells the others they're missing the obvious political move. Verse 50 gives his cynical but ultimately prophetic words. "Nor consider that it is expedient for us, that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish not."
It's expedient, it's politically advantageous for us if this one man dies, rather than risking the whole nation suffering under Roman crackdown. It's utterly ruthless logic.
It is. But here's the incredible irony. John, writing later under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, tells us Caiaphas didn't fully grasp what he was saying.
How so? John explains it in verses 51 and 52.
John writes, "And this spake he not of himself, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus should die for that nation, and not for that nation only, but that also he should gather together in one the children of God that were scattered abroad."
So God actually used the high priest's self-serving political calculation as a vehicle for prophecy, declaring the substitutionary atonement.
Exactly. Caiaphas meant it as cold political strategy, but God turned his words into a statement of divine purpose. Jesus would die for the nation, and indeed for all God's children scattered throughout the world to bring them together. God used the enemy's plot to declare the scope of salvation.
That's just astounding. The very plan designed to eliminate Jesus becomes the means of fulfilling God's plan for redemption.
It's a profound example of God's sovereignty over human affairs, even evil intentions. But the immediate result of Caiaphas's argument was decisive. Verse 53.
Then from that day forth they took counsel together to put him to death.
That was it. The raising of Lazarus, the greatest sign of Jesus' power over death, ironically solidified the official decision to kill him. The display of life sealed his death warrant. Tag 5.2 withdrawal and anticipation, VV 54 to 57.
So the official order is out, effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus knows the Sanhedrin has decided he must die. What does he do?
He doesn't force a confrontation immediately. He's still operating on the Father's timetable. So verse 54 tells us, "Jesus therefore walked no more openly among the Jews, but went thence unto a country near to the wilderness, into a city called Ephraim, and there continued with his disciples."
He withdraws strategically. It wasn't time yet for the final Passover week in Jerusalem. He retreats to a less public area to wait for the appointed hour.
It shows his wisdom, his prudence. He wasn't recklessly seeking martyrdom. He was perfectly submitted to the Father's timing for the cross.
And the chapter ends by setting the stage for that final confrontation. Verse 55 mentions the Jewish Passover feast was near, and people were going up to Jerusalem.
Right, the city is filling up. And verse 56 says people were looking for Jesus, asking each other, "What think ye that he will not come to the feast?" There's this buzz, this anticipation mixed with tension. Will he dare show himself?
Especially since, as verse 57 confirms, now both the chief priests and the Pharisees had given a commandment that if any man knew where he were, he should show it, that they might take him.
The official arrest order is public knowledge. The atmosphere is charged. Everyone knows the authorities want him. John chapter 11 ends perfectly poised, setting up the final journey into Jerusalem for Passion Week.
Wow, what a chapter. If we try to synthesize the core message, what stands out most?
It has to be the absolute, undeniable authority of Jesus Christ over death itself. That I am the resurrection and the life statement is the anchor. He doesn't just give life, he is life.
And the implication then is that this isn't just a historical account of Lazarus, it has direct relevance to us right now.
Absolutely. This whole narrative challenges us to look at the dead situations in our own lives. You know, those areas that feel hopeless, maybe decaying relationships, financial crises, long-term addictions, spiritual dryness, anything that feels like it's been dead 4 days, and frankly, it stinks.
Things where our reason tells us it's too late. It's impossible.
Exactly. And the central question Jesus posed to Martha echoes down to us in those situations. Believest thou this? Do you believe right now that he is the resurrection and the life, powerful enough to bring life even there?
That's the challenge. So how do we move from just acknowledging that to actually applying it? The outline suggests some practical steps drawn from that interaction at the tomb.
Yeah, I think these are really helpful. First, it says, stop listening to reason. That means consciously tuning out that inner Martha voice, the one that says, Lord, by this time he stinketh. Stop focusing on the decay, the impossibility based on past experience or sensory evidence.
Okay, stop listening to the voice of doubt and despair.
Fine.
What's the second step?
Listen to command. Instead of the voice of reason, start actively listening to the voice of Jesus that says, if thou wouldest believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God. We need to elevate his promise above our perception of the problem. His word has to become louder than the circumstances.
Believe first, then see. So stop listening to reason, start listening to his command. What's next?
Third, roll away the stone. Faith requires action. Just as they had to physically move the stone, we often need to take a concrete step of faith based on his word, even when it feels illogical or scary. We have to remove the barrier of our own doubt, our inaction, our unbelief, to give him access to the dead place.
So it's not passive belief, it's acting on that belief, doing our part to clear the way for his power.
And the final step, partner in losing. When Jesus does bring new life, when he answers prayer, breaks a chain, resurrects a situation, we then have a role, often with our community, in getting rid of the leftover grave clothes, meaning we need to actively work and help others work, to shed the old habits, the old mindsets, the fears, the patterns associated with that old death. We partner with him and with each other to walk fully in the new freedom he provides, getting untangled from the past.
Stop listening to reason. Listen to command. Roll away the stone. Partner in loosing. That's a really practical takeaway from this incredible story.
It really is. It brings the power of Bethany right into our lives today. Hashtag tag outro.
So wrapping up our discussion on John chapter 11, we've seen the divine purpose behind God's delays, the world-altering power contained in Jesus' I am statement, his incredibly deep compassion, and that crucial link between our faith and seeing his glory.
And the story leaves us with that unavoidable truth. Encountering the raw power of God, especially power over death, forces a response. It polarized people then, and it still does today.
Which leads to a final thought for you, the listener. How are you responding to the evidence of Christ's authority? Especially his authority over the things that seem dead and hopeless in your own life. Will that evidence lead you to a deeper present tense faith, like Martha's confession? Or will you allow reason and fear to harden your heart, like the leaders who chose power over truth?
That's the challenge he leaves us with. Now, as a next step to really cement what we've discussed today from the You Need Faith in Jesus team's materials.
Right. To solidify your understanding of this lesson, make sure you use the flashcards. They'll help you review the key terms and concepts we covered.
And after that, take the quiz for this lesson. Passing the quiz is important as it will mark this lesson as complete in your study journey.
Thank you so much for joining us today as we explored the depth and power of John chapter 11. It's been a privilege to unpack it with you.
We look forward to digging into Scripture with you again soon.